Comprehensive Guide to Building a Secure C/CD Pipeline for Kubernetes Deployment on AWS. This podcast is brought to you by Business Compass LLC. We are an Amazon Web Services advanced consulting partner. We build and migrate workloads to Amazon Cloud. Our website is businesscompassllc.com. Our phone number is 973-638-2228. Our email address is contact@businesscompassllc.us. Introduction: End-to-end Kubernetes Project Overview. In today's fast-paced DevOps environment, ensuring a seamless, secure and efficient C/CD pipeline for Kubernetes applications is critical. This podcast walks you through building a secure C/CD pipeline for deploying a Netflix clone application on AWS using Jenkins, SonarQube, Trivy, Prometheus, and Grafana. We will cover everything from setting up infrastructure to deploying and monitoring your application. Prerequisites: essential tools and knowledge for Kubernetes deployment. Before diving into the setup, ensure you have the following tools and knowledge. Basic understanding of Kubernetes and Docker. AWS account with necessary permissions. Jenkins server setup knowledge. Familiarity with Prometheus and Grafana for monitoring. Basic knowledge of C/CD principles. High-level overview. Key stages of the Kubernetes project setup. Infrastructure setup. Provisioning servers for Jenkins, monitoring, and Kubernetes nodes on AWS. Jenkins setup. Installing and configuring Jenkins and essential plugins. Security implementation, integrating SonarQube and Trivy for code quality and vulnerability scanning. Monitoring setup, Prometheus and Grafana are set up for real-time monitoring. C/CD pipeline, building and automating the pipeline with Jenkins. Application deployment, deploying the application on Kubernetes. Monitoring, using Grafana to monitor Kubernetes clusters and application performance. Accessing the application, instructions on accessing the deployed Netflix clone application. Infrastructure setup, provisioning servers for Jenkins, monitoring, and Kubernetes nodes on AWS, provision of the necessary EC2 instances on AWS. Jenkins server, this is used to run C/CD pipelines. Monitoring server, for Prometheus and Grafana. Kubernetes nodes, master and worker nodes, are used to deploy the application. Ensure each server has appropriate security groups and IAM roles configured for necessary access and security. Installing and configuring Jenkins, setting up Jenkins server and essential plugins. Install Jenkins, set up Jenkins on an EC2 instance. Configure Jenkins, install essential plugins such as the Kubernetes plugin, Git, Docker pipeline, and email extension. Security configuration, secure Jenkins with appropriate user roles and permissions. Implementing security with SonarQube and Trivy, integrating code quality and vulnerability scanning tools. SonarQube setup, integrate SonarQube with Jenkins to ensure code quality checks are part of the pipeline. Trivy integration, add Trivy to scan Docker images for vulnerabilities before deployment. Setting up monitoring and visualization with Prometheus and Grafana, monitoring hardware and application metrics in real time. Install Prometheus, set up Prometheus on the monitoring server to collect metrics. Install Grafana, set up Grafana to visualize metrics collected by Prometheus. Configuration, configure Prometheus to monitor Kubernetes nodes and Grafana to display dashboards for real-time monitoring. Configuring email notifications, integrating email alerts for Jenkins pipeline results. Email setup, configure Jenkins email extension plugin. Pipeline alerts, set up email notifications for different C/CD pipeline stages to alert on build failures or successes. Building the C/CD pipeline with Jenkins, automating code analysis, image building, and deployment. Pipeline script, create a Jenkins pipeline script to automate code analysis with SonarQube, image building with Docker, and deployment to Kubernetes. Job configuration, configure Jenkins jobs to trigger code commits, pull requests, and scheduled intervals. Integrating a WASP dependency check and Trivy, enhancing security with vulnerability scanning. A WASP dependency check, integrate a WASP dependency check with Jenkins to scan for vulnerable dependencies. Trivy scanning. Ensure that Trivy scans are part of the pipeline to check Docker images for vulnerabilities. Deploying the application on Kubernetes, setting up Kubernetes clusters and deploying the application. Kubernetes cluster. Set up Kubernetes clusters using tools like Excel. Application deployment. Deploy the Netflix clone application on the Kubernetes cluster using Helm charts or Kubernetes manifests. Monitoring Kubernetes clusters with Grafana. Real-time monitoring of Kubernetes nodes and application performance. Prometheus metrics. Configure Prometheus to scrape metrics from Kubernetes nodes. Grafana dashboards. Create dashboards in Grafana to monitor node health, application performance, and resource utilization. Accessing the deployed application. Instructions to access the deployed Netflix clone application. Service exposure. Expose the application using a Kubernetes load balancer or ingress. Access instructions. Provide URL and access instructions to view the deployed Netflix clone application. Conclusion. Recap of the Kubernetes project setup and deployment process. Building a secure C/CD pipeline for Kubernetes on AWS involves multiple stages. From setting up infrastructure and Jenkins, integrating security tools like SonarQube and Trivy, and deploying and monitoring your application. By following this podcast, you can ensure a robust, secure, and efficient deployment process for your Kubernetes applications. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please share this podcast, visit our website, and follow our social media links.